Cherry is a new film by the Russo Brothers. You may know the name, the Russo Brothers. They of course made the Avengers films, and from the Avengers they have pulled Spider-Man, Tom Holland, to star in this movie. This film is streaming exclusively on Apple TV+. There is a 7-day free trial to watch it though, so if you do want to watch this movie, that is the way to do it. Now this movie follows our unnamed main character played by Tom Holland, and it's a story about a large chunk of his life. It starts off when he's in college, when he's a young man. He meets a girl, they fall madly in love with each other. Then they have to go their separate ways. She goes to university, he goes to war. They reunite, but he has PTSD, so they both end up becoming hard drug users. They lose control, he starts robbing banks, etc, etc, etc. Now this is loosely a true story. It's based on a novel by a guy who wrote this novel, and it was sort of about himself, but it doesn't really count as an autobiography. But a lot of the things that happened to this character did actually happen to this man. Now, I've been keeping an eye on this movie for a little while, ever since I first saw the teaser. I thought, okay, that looks good, I'm definitely gonna check that out when it comes out, and I'm so glad I did. This movie was superb. In particular, I just love the style of this movie. They used title cards in this movie for each different section of the movie, so you've got prologue, chapter 1 to 5, and then epilogue. Obviously they've taken that inspiration from the book, but it's nice that it did that. It really sort of split the movie up, and that's the thing about this movie. Each of these different sections felt so different, so varied, and it added a really nice bit of variety to the movie as a whole. Like the first chapter, when he's at college, it's really peaceful and enjoyable viewing. Obviously none of this movie is plain sailing for our characters, but it was nice just to sort of start off with a bit of downtime. But then they just sort of flip that up with really crazy tension in like the war setting, and when he comes back with the drug use. The story took time with all these segments. It's a fairly long movie, it's about 2 hours 20, and each segment, none of it was rushed. It took its own time, and for a long movie it didn't drag because it was just very nicely paced. Now on top of the styling of this movie, all other elements were just fantastic. The soundtrack is beautiful. From the very first bit of music you hear, you're drawn in. The score is great. And one of the things for me that takes a movie from being pretty decent to very good is the soundtrack, because I feel like that's the thing you really remember from a movie. The film also looked great. The cinematography was outstanding here. The editing was also sublime. The transitions, the variety, just, it had everything going on. You won't see many movies better shot this year than this one, I highly doubt. On top of this, they really experimented with the styling and the editing techniques. Like they used lots of color gradients as well to sort of set the mood, set the tone. Slow motion was also very effective in this movie when used for certain scenes. And in the earlier segments of the movie, Tom Holland does break the fourth wall a few times, which at first I was like, okay, is the whole movie going to be like this? But it wasn't something that was actually used throughout. It was just used for earlier segments as he's sort of talking to the camera to tell us what's really going on with his life, his point of view, how he's feeling. I gotta say, when we've mainly seen actors in roles such as playing a superhero, it's hard to really get a grasp for how good they are as an actor, what is their potential. Tom Holland showed it here. He showed how good of an actor he is, because this is the best performance I've ever seen him in by far. He is excellent as Spider-Man. He was excellent in that movie that I reviewed, the Netflix one. I cannot for the life of me remember what it's called. I thought at the time that was his best performance, but after seeing this, he's just incredible. He's so good in this. I want to see him in so many more roles outside of Spider-Man because of this. Because now it's a case of I can look at him and not just see Spider-Man. I can see a very good actor. The range of emotions, his American accent is just nailed dead on. Now for me, it feels weird to hear him in his normal British accent. That sounds like the thing he's putting on. And his girlfriend in the movie, Cara Bravo, was also just brilliant. The chemistry between them was really good. They bounced off each other, and it was one of those relationships on the screen that actually felt authentic. It felt real. It didn't feel fake. It didn't feel Hollywoodized. It felt like these two characters actually loved each other. The rest of the cast were brilliant in this movie. I could not pick out a performance that I thought, that doesn't seem right, seems a bit out of place. No, everyone was great. Now, on top of Tom Holland showing his capabilities outside of the MCU, the Russo brothers did the same. Obviously, this is something a bit different for them. They're branching out from what they've been doing for like the past 10 years, but they showed just how good they could be. They brought their own style. You would not ever associate this as a movie being made by people that make superhero films. This is so far from it, but the quality is still there. The Avengers movies have pretty much been the best movies in the entire MCU run. And it's not just because they're team up movies, it's because they're directed very well, and the Russo brothers are clearly very good directors, and they've made another blinding movie here. Now obviously no spoilers, but when it came to the conclusion of this movie, the ending, the epilogue, I just loved it. I thought it was such a satisfying ending, and it was an ending that as I was watching the movie progress, I was really hoping for. I was thinking in my head, God, I hope it ends this way, that'd be so nice. And I think it says a lot about how likable the characters are when you really want them to have a happy ending. When it's not a case of how you're not really that bothered where they end up, you're really thinking, God, I want them to have this happy ending. And I gotta say, it's one of those endings that just had me smiling at the screen. I was just sat there looking like a smug cat, and then the credits rolled, played some brilliant music once again to see the movie off, and I just thought, wow, wow. A satisfying, wholesome, brilliant ending to a brilliant film. Now, prior to watching this movie, I had actually seen a couple of the reviews. Mostly I'd seen the tomato meter score on Rotten Tomatoes, and it said like 44%. I was thinking, oh God, this movie must suck. Now, I don't know if they've seen some things that are wrong with this movie that I just haven't picked up on, but for the life of me, I cannot see why it's getting a score that low. I thought this movie was pretty much faultless. When I see reviews like that are talking about it negatively, I'm thinking to myself after watching it, okay, what are the flaws then? What have I missed out on? And I'm trying to think of stuff that's wrong with the movie. And I think if I'm trying to think of stuff that's wrong with the film and nothing is jumping to me that is clearly wrong with the film, then I'm starting to wonder, is there actually anything wrong with the film? You know, I think one reviewer said it felt cliche, the story. I don't know. Is it cliche? I don't know. I mean, I guess it hits some stereotypes, like going to war and getting PTSD and then becoming a drug user. I mean, yeah, I mean, that shit happens, but it's not cliche, I wouldn't say. It's a story, it's what happens. And they didn't tell the story in a cliche way. They told it in a very stylish, effective, emotional, and gripping way. You know, every now and then you see a movie and it just makes you realize how beautiful and good cinema can be. This for me is one of those movies. I just can't fault this movie. It's one that I want to rewatch again, and it's gonna stick in my head for a while. Cherry gets a 10 out of 10. I cannot fault this movie. I've tried to think, where are the flaws, where are the faults? I cannot see any. This movie was original, it was fresh, and it is not worthy of negative reviews because so much effort and passion went into this movie, and therefore it deserves top marks. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. We got Justice League Snyder Cut coming up. Very excited for that. Hopefully it's as good as this, but that is asking for a lot. I'll see you in the next one.